Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Reset podcast for the Black working class. I am your host, Mr. Andre Clay. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone that's tuning in on Facebook, on YouTube. Please subscribe to the page so that you can see past episodes. I thank you, everyone, for tuning in the last few weeks. I've been on vacation to our previous episodes of the Reset podcast. I greatly appreciate that. And today we have a very special show. It's going to be a call-in show. Today's topic, the Biden-Harris ticket, symbolism or substance. Again, today's show is a call-in show. Call-in is 708-414-0849. Again, that's 708-414-0849. And with that being said, let us begin. Now, in the war against white supremacy here in America, Black Americans have always been fighting racism on several battlefields, whether that's the job market, housing market, criminal justice, etc. But no place do I see us losing more ground than in politics. Now, because of this, American descendants of slaves or foundational Black Americans, we have a strong need for there to be proper representation of our unique socio-political issues. In other words, we need elected officials that will deliberately and accurately address concerns that are specific to our people. Now, last week, we saw Democratic presidential nominee Biden pick Senator Kamala Harris, for VP, and both mainstream and social media was set ablaze. The Trump campaign immediately attacked the same day with a campaign ad, the phony Kamala and Slow Joe ad. I'm not sure if everyone got a chance to see that one. The Democrats, on the other hand, showed both celebration and concern. And nowhere was that blaze hotter than in Black America, specifically among ADOS. Now, for those that celebrated the ticket, it meant there was a real chance, given the lack of enthusiasm for Biden, that 45 would be kicked out of office and Biden will become the 46th president of the United States, along with Harris becoming the first Black and female vice president. Very historic. But many ADOS concerned that this was not a winning ticket. And this was mostly due to Biden and Harris's past records of showing little empathy for the plight of Black Americans during the terms of their elected positions. Biden as senator and Harris as DA and state's attorney of California. Now, besides the critique of their records, the question of Harris's Blackness began to surface again. So the question of why needed to be asked, along with what does her Blackness have to do with anything? Now, today, I will attempt to explain this. And again, this is a call-in show. Later on, I will be opening up the phone lines so everyone can call in. And that number to call in, again, is 708-414-0849. Again, that's 708-414-0849. And to begin with this explanation, I want to first give a shout out to Yvette Carnell and Tone Talks for actually inspiring me to present this and narrate this the way that I'm doing it today. So with that being said, allow me to share my screen because I want to go to this article. Second here. All right. What I want to talk to everyone about is a little bit of history today. And this article from history.com I came across, And hopefully, this will help to explain why Kamala's lineage is so important to so many of us. Black leaders during Reconstruction. Now, one of the most important aspects of Reconstruction was the active participation of African Americans, including thousands of former slaves, in the political, economic, and social life of the South. The era was, to a great extent, defined by their quest for autonomy and equal rights under the law, both as individuals and for the black community as a whole. During Reconstruction, some 2,000 African Americans held public office, from the local level all the way up to the U.S. Senate, though they never achieved representation in government proportionate to their numbers. Rise of black activism. Before the Civil War began, African Americans had only been able to vote in a few northern states, and there were virtually no black office holders. The months after the Union victory in April 1865 saw extensive mobilization within the black community, with meetings, parades, and petitions calling for legal and political rights, including the all-important right to vote. During the first 2 years of Reconstruction, blacks organized equal rights leagues throughout the South and held state and local conventions to protest discriminatory treatment and demand suffrage, as well as equality before the law. These African American activists bitterly opposed the Reconstruction policies of President Andrew Johnson, which excluded blacks from Southern politics and allowed state legislators to pass restrictive black codes regulating the lives of the freed men and women. Fierce resistance to these discriminatory laws, as well as growing opposition to Johnson's policies in the North, led to a Republican victory in the U.S. congressional elections of 1866 and to a new phase of Reconstruction that would give African Americans a more active role in the political, economic, and social life of the South. A radical change. During the decade known as the Radical Reconstruction from 1866 to 77, Congress granted African American men the status and rights of citizenship, including the right to vote, as guaranteed by the 14th and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Beginning in 1867, branches of the Union League, which encouraged the political activism of African Americans, spread throughout the South. During the state constitutional conventions held in 1867 and 69, blacks and white Americans stood side by side for the first time in political life. Blacks made up the overwhelming majority of Southern Republican voters, forming a coalition with carpetbaggers and scallywags, derogatory terms referring to recent arrivals from the North and Southern white Republicans, respectively. A total of 265 African American delegates were elected, more than 100 of whom had been born into slavery. Almost half of the elected black delegates served in South Carolina and Louisiana, where blacks had the longest history of political organization. In most other states, African Americans were underrepresented compared to their population. In all, 16 African Americans served in the U.S. Congress during Reconstruction. More than 600 more were elected to the state legislatures, and hundreds more held local offices across the South. Background and risk of leadership. Many black leaders during Reconstruction had gained their freedom before the Civil War by self-purchase or through the will of a deceased owner, had worked as skilled slave artisans, and served in the Union Army. A large number of black political leaders came from the church, having worked as ministers during slavery or in the early years of construction, when the church served as the center of the black community. Hiram Revels, the first African American elected to the U.S. Senate, he took the Senate seat from Mississippi that had been vacated by Jefferson Davis in 1861, was born free in North Carolina and attended college in Illinois. He worked as a preacher in the Midwest in the 1850s and as a chaplain to a black regiment in the Union Army before going to Mississippi in 1865 to work for the Freedmen's Bureau. Blanche K. Bruce, elected to the Senate in 1875 from Mississippi, had lived a privileged life as a slave if there was such a thing, and also receive some education. The backgrounds of these men was typical of the leaders that emerged during Reconstruction, but differed greatly from the majority of the African American population. As the most radical aspect of the so called radical Reconstruction period, the political activism of the African American community also inspired the most hostility from Reconstruction's opponents. Southern whites, frustrated with policies giving former slaves the right to vote and hold office, increasingly turned to intimidation and violence as a means of reaffirming white supremacy. The Ku Klux Klan targeted local Republican leaders and blacks who challenged their white employers, and at least 35 black officials were murdered by the Klan and other white supremacist organizations during the Reconstruction era. Now, with that being said, let me go back to the broadcast room. All right. Given this history that I just read here, we have a little context now into why, for many ADOS Americans, blackness is really a thing. All of those elected officials after Reconstruction were ADOS. And since then, we've seen a decline in the representation in Washington. Today, there are currently 51 African American representatives and 2 African American delegates in the U.S. House of Representatives. And most of these members are part of the Congressional Black Caucus. And in the Senate, we only have 3 people. We have Tim Scott, Cory Booker, and Kamala Harris. That's unacceptable. And it also speaks to why more ADOS need to run for political office. Now, what does Kamala's lineage have to do with anything? Well, I would hearken everyone to think back to the Obama administration. When President Obama was elected, he became the first black president. However, we also knew that he was born of a Kenyan father, white mother in Hawaii. He was not ADOS, and many believe he did not do much specifically for blacks. Now, during his term, half of black wealth was wiped out after he bailed out Wall Street over Main Street, and most black folks lost their homes. Now, this helped to fuel the doubt about his empathy towards ADOS. And in my mind, that's understandable. And since that, black folks in America, we decided that we're not going to choose symbolism. It's high time that black Americans demand something for their vote. We need something of substance. We are still facing socioeconomic doom. As predicted by most economists in this country, black wealth is expected to be at 0, and I would argue is probably there now, by the year 2053. And so, more than ever, we need proper representation that will properly address and boldly address the issues concerning our people. Now, the debate about Senator Harris, her record, is a legitimate critique. It's a legitimate concern to people because during her tenure as an elected official in California as DA and state's attorney, her record came under question. And we also saw that when she ran for president during the primaries, she couldn't even win her own state. That right there was very telling to me. And to be fair, I pulled an article about Kamala's criminal justice record that I want to also share with folks, and I'm gonna read a little bit of it. But hopefully, it too will help explain the harsh critique that she's receiving from Black Americans. Give me just a second here. Screen share again. All right. From Vox, we have Kamala Harris's controversial record on criminal justice explained. Senator Kamala Harris has earned a reputation of a rising star in the Democrat Party, most recently becoming former Vice President Joe Biden's running mate in the presidential election. But Harris has also faced questions over her record on criminal justice issues, a record that's led some critics to describe her not as a progressive reformer, but as a relic of a tough on crime era going back to the 1990s and 2000s, more specifically when Biden helped to author the 94 crime bill signed into law by Bill Clinton. A generation after Democrats embraced tough on crime policies that swelled prisons, populations, progressive activists are pushing to make the criminal justice system less punitive and racist, and polls show a majority of Democrats support such efforts. Harris has argued that her views align with those with the new progressive movement, but her record in California, where she was a prosecutor, district attorney, and state attorney general before representing the state in the U.S. Senate, has come under harsh scrutiny and debate since she launched her own presidential campaign in 2019. Harris argues that she's fought to reverse incarceration, scale back the war on drugs, and address racial disparities in the criminal justice system. But as she has become a prominent political figure, she's had several viral moments questioning President Donald Trump's nominees in the Senate. Those more familiar with her criminal justice record, particularly on the left, have voiced their skepticism. As we scroll down here, quote, in her career, Ms. Harris did not barter or trade to get the support of more conservative law and order types. She gave it all away, wrote Laza Bazelon, a law professor and former director of the Loyola Law School Project for the Innocent in Los Angeles, in a New York Times op-ed. Harris's supporters argue that these criticisms sell her short, missing the time she was ahead of the country and her party on criminal justice issues, such as when she implemented prison diversion programs, as district attorney, and a first-of-its-kind racial bias training for police officers. Kamala Harris has spent her career fighting for reforms in the criminal justice system and pushing the envelope to keep everyone safer by bringing fairness and accountability. Lily Adams, a spokesperson for Harris at the time, previously told me. Now, Harris, as part of her previous presidential campaign, also released a criminal justice reform plan that seeks to scale back incarceration, end the death penalty, and solitary confinement, ban private prisons, and get rid of cash bail. Biden also backs a fairly aggressive criminal justice reform plan despite his own mixed record on criminal justice issues. A close examination of Harris's record shows it's filled with contradictions, though. She pushed for programs that help people find jobs instead of putting them in prison, but also fought to keep people in prison even after they were proved innocent. She refused to pursue the death penalty against a man who killed a police officer, but also defended California's death penalty system in court. She implemented training programs to address police officers' racial biases, but also resisted calls to get her office to investigate certain police shootings. But what seems like contradictions may reflect a balancing act. Harris's parents worked on civil rights causes, and she came from a background well aware of the excesses of the criminal justice system. But in office, she played the role of a prosecutor and California's lawyer. She started in an era when tough on crime policies were popular across party lines, but she rose to national prominence as criminal justice reform started to take off nationally. She had an eye on higher political office as support for criminal justice reform became the rigueur, I guess, for Democrats, but she still had work as California's top law enforcement official. Her race and gender likely made this balancing act even harder. In the U.S., studies have found that more than 90% of elected prosecutors are white, and more than 80% are male. As a Black and Indian American woman, Harris stood out, inviting scrutiny and skepticism, especially by people who may hold racist stereotypes about how Black people view law enforcement or sexist views about whether women are tough enough for the job. Still, the result is the same. As she became more nationally visible, Harris was less known as a progressive prosecutor as she'd been earlier in her career, and more of a reform light or even anti-reform attorney general. Now critics have labeled her a cop, a sellout for a broken criminal justice system. Now, how much all of this is a liability for Harris as a nominee for vice president remains to be seen as the Democratic ticket tries to balance support from progressives who have called to end mass incarceration and defund the police, with support from moderates who may prefer a candidate with law and order credentials. How it plays out may help determine, at least indirectly, whether Biden and Harris can defeat Trump and Vice President Pence in November. Now, let me go back to the studio. And you can read more about this article, search on Vox. The Balancing Act. The Balancing Act hurts Black Americans. Without someone coming in, being elected and coming in to establish some type of reform in her positions, you're not helping. And upon after talking to a few people from California about Ms. Harris's record there, none seemed too happy about it. One thing we have to be sure to understand is that we are well aware of what we need as a people. Black people have been under the thumb of white supremacy for far too long and been the most dedicated voting bloc for the Democrat Party. So it's only natural, I think, that we demand more from the Democrat Party. Oftentimes, however, the Democrat Party, instead of giving Black people what we need to better our condition, they tend to introduce more of the same old one tie lift all boats type of policy prescriptions. And whenever they do that, Black people in America, we always find ourselves at the bottom. We've always found ourselves at the tail end of receiving any type of help, any type of assistance, and this needs to stop. How much longer will Black Americans allow the Democrat Party to continue to ignore us? How long are we going to continue to allow that? Now, those ADOS Americans who celebrate this ticket, this Biden and Harris ticket, what I saw last week was a lot of condemnation of those other ADOS Americans who were not so enthusiastic about it. In fact, back and forth, there was a lot of vitriol. And I understand why. I totally understand why. The need to get Donald Trump out of office is real. In the eyes of most Americans that I know, he's destroying this damn country. So yeah, he needs to get up out of there. And his overt racism is what really turns the stomachs of most Americans. Whenever we listen to this man talk, whenever we look at any of the policy that he pushes on folks, it's ridiculous. It's just utterly ridiculous. So it's very understandable why most Americans want his ass out of office. And I do too. However, more than wanting him out of office, I want the Democrat Party to finally stop ignoring the voter bloc that has been the most loyal to you, the one that when we vote in the upper 80 and 90 percentage of us, you're almost guaranteed to be elected. Without us, you cannot win. So therefore, Black Americans deserve more from the Democrat Party. And I would urge those other black Americans who criticize black Americans who are not as enthusiastic about voting for the Democrat ticket, instead of condemning those black Americans, why don't you go to Biden and Harris and let them know, hey, you need to come up with some real policy prescriptions to address the socioeconomic conditions of our people. Because that's all that those who are not enthusiastic about those two are asking for. It's not unreasonable. It makes perfect sense to me. Our vote should be transactional. We should be getting something for it, especially since we have been the most dedicated. Now, even when Hillary ran against Trump, black Americans remain the highest percentage of voters for the Democrat Party. There were more black Americans that voted for Hillary than white Americans, white women, white men, Hispanics, Asians, everybody. We continue to do this. See, in our minds, this is our party. We are the most invested in it. And so again, I think it's high time that we demand more out of this party. They owe us. They owe us big time. So with that being said, I do want to open up the phone lines. Get my phone over here. And if anyone would like to chime in and address some of what I've had to say, feel free to do so. So far, we have Miss Tucker. Hey, Dre, great topic for today. Mr. Curtis Brooks, hey, bro. How y'all doing today? Yeah, we definitely want to stay abreast on what's going on in politics with us. We're suffering out here. COVID-19 has revealed a lot to the rest of America about the condition of how black Americans are living. While many people were able to stock up during the beginning of COVID, a lot of black Americans were not. And so therefore, it revealed the condition that we're truly in. Some folks may not understand why it's so important that our elected officials have lineage dating back to slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow. It is the idea that they would better understand what we're going through as a people, and that they would, once in office, fight harder for policy prescriptions that would help us. We need this. Beating your fellow brother and sister up about the Democrat Party and its nominees, that's wasteful energy. Wasteful. Because when it's all said and done, those who are not as enthusiastic about voting for these two, they're right about what they want. It's right. This is what our people need. And if you are that enthused about those two, again, I suggest that you confront those two. Demand that they come up with real policy prescriptions. This is what we need. This is what we need. Phone lines open at 708-414-0849. Again, that's 708-414-0849. President Obama, I think for a lot of us, kind of taught us a lesson about symbolism. President Obama, although I didn't think he was a bad president, he certainly did not do enough for the uplift of our people. Our wealth was indeed cut in half while he was in office with his bailout of the Big Three and Wall Street. And most black Americans were hoping that he would have understood this. But he just told the party line. And that is the exact same fear that we have of Ms. Harris and Joe Biden. towing the party line. Again, the one tide lifts all boats philosophy and approach to policy, it doesn't work. We have not benefited as a people with that approach. So again, phone lines are open at 708-414-0849. If you want to come in and comment, if you have anything to say, anything to offer to the discussion, because it's very important that we have this. Very important that we have this. Phone lines are open, 708-414-0849. How you doing, Mr. Brooks? What's going on with you, my brother? I see you over there in the comment section. Hello, Ms. Monica. All righty. Well, with that being said, everyone, it doesn't look like folks want to chime in today. Okay. Yeah, it's not looking like folks want to chime in today, but that's okay. On Facebook, you know I'll be seeing you because I want all the smoke. I do appreciate the debates that we've been having on Facebook concerning the Biden-Harris ticket. I think the concerns are legit. I think that they are warranted, and I think that Senator Harris and Joe Biden have a lot to answer for. I think they have a lot to explain. I do encourage everyone to go to Biden's campaign site and take a real close look at his policy prescriptions, his plans, and you will see for yourself that they're not too innovative. They're not really moving the needle for me. And Senator Harris, given her past performance on stage in the debates, given interviews that she's given, for a lot of us African Americans, we see her as just doing more pandering. She seems to be too much of a chameleon. She goes with what's ever popular at the time in order to keep her job. And this is not what we need. We don't need folks who are going to continue to use us as pawns in order to get elected and then turn their backs on us once they're in the door. Black people, we need to hold these politicians more accountable. We need to be holding them accountable before the election and after that damn election. That's what we need to be doing. We have to be fearless about demanding those things that will help our people the best. Criticizing one another about our critiques of these two, again, it's not going to do us any good. It's not helping at all. And it's very understandable why we will want someone who does understand our plight better. It's a damn shame that during Reconstruction, we had more representation for our people than we do today. And that's white supremacy keeping a thumb on us again. Phone lines open at 708-414-0849. How do you feel about the fact that we have less representation today than we did during Reconstruction? How do you really feel about that? I know it doesn't make me feel too good. And any time that we have a black person who is not of the same lineage as ADOS, we see them towing that party line. We see them towing that party line. With that being said, everyone, I think it's probably time to log off. Thank you for tuning in today. If you would like to reach out to The Reset, check us out on Facebook. Check us out on YouTube. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And good night, everybody.